Despite its fairly small population of 24 million, North Korea retains one of the largest militaries of the world, particularly when it comes to its ground forces, the Korean People's Army, or KPA. This army is equipped with a large quantity of local equipment, developed on the base of older Soviet or Chinese technology with a number of locally developed features. The major workhorse of the KPA's mechanized elements can be found in the form of the 323 Armored Personnel Carrier, which has been in service and mass-produced in North Korea since the early 1970s. 323 is the mainstay armored personnel carrier used by North Korea, and its chassis has been used for a wide variety of self-propelled artillery pieces, multiple rocket launchers, anti-tank, anti-air systems, and even the base of the M1981 Shinang light tank's hull. Hello, and welcome to another Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host, Wood, and today I'll be covering the development and design of the North Korean 323 Armored Personnel Carrier. More discreet than North Korean main battle tanks, it is a very important workhorse of North Korea's military, used for a wide variety of roles. If you like our videos and want to support us, please consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to improve future Tank Encyclopedia content. Any help will be greatly appreciated. Before we move on with the APC of choice for North Korea, we'd like to give a shout out to fellow YouTube channel Battle Order. While we focus on individual vehicle types, they focus on how these vehicles fit into military units, country doctrines, and general nitty-gritty stuff related to ground warfare, armored or not. An excellent example is their recent amazing video on the future of Japanese tank forces. Check them out and leave a comment saying Tank Encyclopedia sent you. The 323 Armored Personnel Carrier is known under several different names. The US Department of Defense calls it the M1973 after the year it was first observed. The name used by the North Koreans appears to be merely 323, and Western enthusiasts prefer calling it the VTT-323. North Korea was fairly late in giving armored personnel carriers the time of day. While North Korea's armored vehicles fleet expanded massively in the 1960s, this mostly concerned tanks, with only a small number of BTRs being acquired from the Soviet Union in this period. A major step in correcting this sidestepping of APCs was procurement of Chinese Type 63A or YW531A APCs, developed by China during the 1960s. The vehicle was a welded steel amphibious armored personnel carrier, armed with China's Type 54 12.7mm machine gun on a pintle mount. It has 4 road wheels and moves through the water with movement on its tracks. The vehicle has a crew of 2 and infantry complement of 10. Typically, overall, the vehicle stands as a simple APC, but one fairly similar to other vehicles at the time, such as the American M113 in terms of capability. North Korea was a bit of an early adopter of this YW531. It appears examples of the type were first acquired by them in 1967, though this may have been a little later. 2 figures have emerged on the number of vehicles acquired. The more probable sits at about 160 to 180, and the other sits at 500. As is typical with North Korea, the development of the 323 is pretty much unknown outside of the country. The fairly recent Shinhung tank plant was likely involved in the development of the vehicle. Built in the 1960s for the local assembly of the Soviet PT-76s, this factory, located in Shinhung County, would evolve to become the standard producer of light, amphibious combat vehicles for the Korean People's Army. Why the North Koreans chose to modify the YW531 is unknown. The Chinese vehicle may have been found to have lacking firepower and amphibious mobility by the KPA, which chose to adopt a modified variant of the type that addressed these issues. This local development may very well have been performed with Chinese approval or even support, and it had been suggested China could have provided industrial support to North Korea to help set up the production lines. The 323 was first observed in 1973 during a parade at Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang, and was subsequently given the designation of M1973 by the US Department of Defense. The vehicle definitely entered service some point in the 1970s. As on the original YW, the 323's hull is a fairly simple welded steel box designed for amphibious capability. A trim vane can be installed, extending from the lower front plate and allowing the vehicle to be less prone to becoming swamped. This configuration is typically used for landing exercises. The vehicle's driver sits in the front left of the hull. He has a hatch as well as a periscopic sight used to provide vision. Another crewman, who appears to be a co-driver, sits on the front right. The vehicle's engine appears to be located on the right as well, just behind this crewman. No information is available on the engine used, but it could very well retain the Deutz BF8L413F diesel engine of German origin producing 320 horsepower, which is found on the Chinese YW. Towards the back, the hull has its troop carrying compartment, as well as the turret, which is mounted slightly rear of the center of the vehicle. The infantry complement of the 323 is about 10 infantrymen, though North Korean sources go so far as to claim the vehicle can carry 12. 10 would already be pretty cramped though. These infantrymen may exit the vehicle by a single rear door without a foldable ramp, or 2 small rooftop hatches which are likely emergency exits and would require a lot of strength to open. This is obviously pretty bad, making the 323 likely a pretty risky vehicle to have to exit in the midst of combat. In comparison to the original YW, the crew compartment of the 323 features another innovation, the presence of firing ports based on those of the BTR-60PB on both sides of the hull, allowing for those infantrymen to use their weapons from inside the vehicle. The 323 suspension features 5 large road wheels, similar to the YW's. A drive sprocket is located at the front and a tender wheel at the rear. The height of the suspension is relatively limited in order to improve the buoyancy of the hull. Unlike the YW, the North Korean vehicle features 2 hydrojets, which may be observed at the rear of the hull on the bottom sides of the infantry compartment's door. These are likely directly based on the PT-76s. Hydrojets significantly improved amphibious capability in comparison to a YW or an M113. Estimates typically place the 323's speed on water at about 10 km an hour. An estimate of the U.S. Marine Corps' intelligence activity places the 323's maximum road speed at 80 km per hour. Unless a major upgrade in its power plant was applied though, the vehicle's maximum speed is likely similar or even a little lower to the YW-531A's 65 km per hour. The longer hull may give the 323 better trench crossing capabilities, estimated at 2.2 meters in the same Marine Corps document. The document also estimates that the 323 may cross a 60 centimeter vertical obstacle or climb a 34-degree slope. It gives an estimated range of 450 kilometers for the North Korean armored personnel carrier. The same Marine Corps document puts the 323's hull protection at 24 millimeters, but it's probably the same 14 millimeter maximum armor thickness as found on the YW. In general, the 323 is only protected against small arms fire and maybe 12.7 millimeter rounds, with some range in the frontal plates. Against any form of anti-armor weapons or mines, this vehicle is pretty much screwed. The most major change from the YW to the 323 is the addition of a fully rotatable turret installed in the center rear. The vehicle's turret is very similar to the one found on the BRDM-2 and the BTR-60PB, both of which are operated in North Korea, and has a simple conical shape. It is, however, widened, and instead of a single 14.5mm KPV machine gun, it takes 2. This turret allows for a relatively high elevation of the main weapons, which, coupled with their high power and range for the machine guns, give them some limited anti-helicopter capabilities. The armor of the turret is probably similar to the hull. Its rotation speed is unknown, though likely decent. The 14.5mm KPV is widely used by North Korea and preferred over the 12.7mm machine guns such as the Dushka or NSV. It is also mounted on the country's T-55, T-59, and Kanmaho fleet. In comparison to those machine guns, the KPV brings to the table the considerable advantage of more powerful bullets. Its 14.5 by 114mm projectiles, which have a high muzzle velocity of 976 to over 1,000 meters per second, provide much better anti-armor capabilities over 12.7mm projectiles, with up to about 32mm of RHA penetration at 500 meters. High explosive incendiary bullets can also provide some serious firepower against infantry. With a rate of fire of 600 RPM per machine gun, the armament of the 323 stands as one of the heaviest found on 1970s armored personnel carriers, far superior to the original YW or M113, and able to provide great firepower for an APC. And that about covers the design of the 323 APC. In part 2, we will cover its service and derivatives made from its hull. If you liked it, please leave a like and a subscription. You can find more information relating to this APC in the full article, which is linked in the description. If you like what we are doing and want to let us continue working on these videos, please consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be allocated to improving our articles and videos for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.